to join you on this day. Coming from the UK here, it's proving to be a very, very pretty autumn here in the UK. It's mild, there's a little bit of rain, but the colour on the trees and the leaves is a beautiful time. And I hope you're all well wherever it is you're from. I can see that great weather in Milan, fantastic, how wonderful to be there. And I've seen there's people from France and people from all around the world. Welcome, welcome. Well, let's have a look at today's webinar. It's good fun, this one, and the object of taking from this webinar is the idea of taking some practical exercises and having fun with them. And because of the idea of fun, will motivate learners and teachers to want to do more and more. Happy birthday, Alice, using readers and stories to motivate learners, particularly to motivate them to, you want me to speak a bit louder, I'll turn up my microphone for you, bear with me. How does that sound? Is that a little bit better? That would be better, yeah? No, it's fine, good. Particularly to motivate them to speak English more. Right, here we go then. A little bit about me. I'm Mike Dodsworth. Hello to those who've seen me, joined me before. I may have visited your country. And I'm a professional storyteller and a drama practitioner, which sees me directing plays or giving drama workshops, as well as telling stories in the UK here and around the world, and encouraging people to be storytellers and use storytelling as a means for entertainment and, of course, particularly in this case, education. Based here in the UK, where I'm speaking from you now, but I do work internationally as well. So hello to those who I've never met before, and hello again to those who I have. From today's webinar, I hope that you'll be able to take away how you can adapt stories and indeed readers, so actual books, and taking the stories from the text and using those to motivate your students to speak English. So from text and story to speaking is the journey that we're looking for you all to take. I'm going to offer you some practical activities you can try in your classroom, those that will build confidence for you and your learners. And for you in particular, turning you on to the idea of being able to spot opportunities to use drama to encourage speaking is the objective here today. And also giving you the confidence and the opportunity to use text and then convert it creatively into opportunities for drama. And I hope that people are using drama in their classroom already and storytelling. If you are, great. If you're not, give it a go. Try and let's see what happens. Today's about experimenting too and taking some risks. Today's featured reader is Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, which is a terrific book, and this year is the 150th anniversary of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, first published by Macmillan all those years ago. So it's a terrifically important book in many ways, and the language in the book is unusual, but very English. I don't know how many of you out there have read it before. Certainly, I'm sure that most of you are aware of this story. But here we have it, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, available from Macmillan in British English. It's aimed at level 5. I'm going to use this reader as the inspiration for some of the exercises today. For those of you who don't know the book, here's a little intro, a little bit of blurb. The story goes that on a sunny day, a little girl called Alice follows a white rabbit down a rabbit hole and into a land called Wonderland. It's a strange place with lots of strange people who live there, lots of strange goings-on. No one seems to be talking sense, but within that, by not talking sense and being nonsensical, it appears that that is exactly what means sense in Wonderland. Everything is in reverse. Alice meets some credible characters, very memorable characters. They've become iconic in literature. Characters such as the Mad Hatter and the March Hare, the Cheshire Cat, the Queen of Hearts, a caterpillar, a range of incredibly strange characters. And the story culminates with a game of croquet and a court case with the Queen of Hearts themselves. I hope you enjoy this book, and if you haven't read it before, or a version of it, this reader is a particularly good example, and it has the original illustrations, which are extremely important too, aren't they? They help us open up a world of imagination by looking at pictures juxtaposed with text. Yes, you're probably quite right. There probably aren't that many people in the world who don't know the book. Now, the idea would be, if you were going to introduce a reader such as this one, or a story to your class of learners, I would always advocate the idea of leading from the front, setting an example, setting a benchmark, establishing a tone with your learners. And the best way of doing this is to take a risk yourself and show your enthusiasm for the story or the reader, and read it out loud. Tell it, if it's not a piece of text, but in this case, read out the book. It doesn't have to be in one long reading. It could be a series of readings to introduce the idea of the book and the reader and the story. Certainly give a very enthusiastic spoken summary of what the reader's all about, so that people can begin to understand and connect with it. But do read it out. Children and adults enjoy being read to, enjoy having stories told to them. They can begin to visualize and see pictures in their head, and it enables them to connect with text. You could also, if you have limited time, choose a particularly exciting section of the story or the reader to focus on for your class. But yes, the idea of being clear, exciting, and animated when you read, using your voice, using your hands, using your face, really connecting with the book and showing your enthusiasm for what it is you're reading out. Yes, enthusiasm can be frightening, but it also is inspirational. It allows people to release their inhibitions and take more risks, and by doing so, stretch themselves a little further. And this is a very communal activity as well. People are gathered as an audience listening to the reader. You can lead from the front, make sure everyone's safe. There's a lot of trust in the environment you're creating. Your enthusiasm for the story will inspire your students. You will have set the benchmark, and they will undoubtedly follow. Let me see if I just skipped one there. No, I'm happy to go. Oh, a word about that. I've gone back to have a little look at the White Rabbit illustration again. I've used some illustrations on these slides from the actual reader, from the original Alice and His Adventures in Wonderland book. The White Rabbit was followed by Alice, and this is a symbol of you leading from the front. Allow your students to follow you like Alice followed the White Rabbit, and you take them into the Wonderland that the rabbit took Alice. You can take these illustrations and these metaphors with a pinch of salt, of course. It's a bit of fun. Let's look out for some more illustrations in the slides too. Now, speaking and listening. As I've said, reading something out loud, listening to a story, delivering it, speaking it. There are a huge range of benefits. This is effectively the world of drama, folks. This is the world of theatre, of performance, of putting a story across in a way that transmits, that communicates. The idea of allowing your students to play, to become characters, to use the characters in the story to explore language, is undoubtedly a fun way of speaking English. And if something's fun, we tend to want to go back and do it more because we felt good. The sound isn't clear for you, Daniela. Let me see if I need to turn up a little bit more. And maybe the sound is a little clearer for you now. Okay, for some it is, for some it isn't. So the idea of having fun certainly encourages you to want to come back and do more. So your learners having fun will want to do more of the same. But it also, having fun is a good way of increasing confidence, because having fun whilst learning isn't necessarily, the student isn't necessarily conscious that they're learning. They're feeling unself-conscious, actually, whilst having fun. And their confidence increases because of that. With more confidence in life generally, as well as the learning experience, you tend to take more risks and stretch yourself a little more and dig a little bit deeper. This is an analogy I like to use, the idea of digging more deeply into the ground. What more can I find down there if I keep digging? This is your learner digging away in the ground, trying to discover more things in the earth, more discoveries. Maybe they're looking for treasure or looking for water. This is the goal for them. Dig more deeply with confidence, stretch themselves more, speak more English, take risks, make mistakes, but within the context of a story or a piece of drama whilst having fun. Stories undoubtedly will introduce more vocabulary, new words, new phrases, and you can take your time and discuss these phrases and new words when they're introduced by the story, either when you are reading it out to the students or when they begin to work with it themselves. The good thing about using a reader or a story is that the scenarios and the characters have been created already, and they're a resource for you to use immediately on tap. Now, it's important to note at this point that drama and storytelling in this case, and books and films and any other form of storytelling that's language or non-textually based, is audience focused. It's for an audience to receive and hopefully understand. So the language in drama has to be performed, and an audience must be faced. So the idea of the learner engaging with drama is that at some point they will have to speak, they will have to perform as a matter of course. It's inevitable. Some will be more willing than others, but you don't have to rush this work. You need to build trust with your students and make a few mistakes too. And not everyone will be willing to jump forward and be the one to start. There always will be starters, and you know the ones in your class who are the most enthusiastic performers. You can use them to show the way and let the other more reluctant ones take their time to understand the work, and eventually they'll find their way in too. Now, the idea of performing to an audience is wonderful, and the great motivation is that an audience will reward a good performance, either through applause or good feedback or laughter. Not laughing at you, but laughing with joy at the performance you've given. It's a great motivator to be rewarded, and the outcome of drama and performance is reward. You may see the stretched, elongated Alice there. Alice finds herself changing quite a lot in Wonderland. She eats things, drinks things, she changes often in size. And I've just used this as an analogy really to talk about stretching oneself, digging deeper, changing, being motivated to do more, stretching and striving to speak more English. Right. Some activities. Is everyone ready for some activities? Take your time if you've got a notepad in front of you or you've got something up on your screen. Remember, these these PowerPoint presentations for these webinars are always available to come back to. But if you want to make notes now, great. And then try some of these out as soon as you can. They're ready to go, these activities. We all need, as teachers, short activities that engage the attention of the class when you need to change the pace or introduce something new. It's good to do this in food terms, in bite-sized pieces, little exciting and tasty nibbles for your learners to enjoy and savor. Little warm-ups, little wrap-ups, little 5-minute fillers. I hope everyone's hungry. I've suddenly made myself quite hungry with this food talk. Let's tuck in. The idea of reading out is quite a tricky one for some people. Even in their native language, some people simply don't like reading out loud. It's quite exposing. But the idea of taking it in turns and inspiring each other is a good idea. It also allows once you've read the story out to the class, you hand it over to them to read out in small sections. You don't necessarily have to pass a read around and one voice is heard by the entire class. Much better initially to put people into small reading groups within the class, and they can enjoy reading the story to each other to a smaller, more intimate audience, where they don't feel quite as exposed. And the exercise can then be built up as confidence increases and the learner becomes more familiar, the reader becomes more familiar with the language. You can try the exercise in the class where one voice will be heard reading an excerpt, and hey presto, they're speaking to a much larger audience, but with more confidence. Start small and then grow large and allow the confidence to flow. Does that make sense to everyone? I think it's a simple approach, and the same applies to lots of subject areas, but particularly in drama, if confidence and trust isn't established and you go too far too soon, then it might not work. Okay, and the student will be reluctant. Okay, so go carefully, very carefully. Small groups, then to large groups. And if large groups isn't, the confidence isn't there, take your time. Do not rush. Okay. Practice dialogue in character. The idea of going into character and then speaking English. So using characters from the reader. Let's say, for example, Alice, or the Cheshire Cat with the enormous grin, the Mad Hatter, the March Hare, the Queen of Hearts, a range of extremely rich characters. In groups, you could offer short scenarios to the groups, or indeed the students could be working in pairs at this point. And this is about speaking. They're already familiar with the reader and the story and the characters. You hand out a range of scenarios, and these can be passed around and swapped so that each group or pair has a chance to do more than one. But you offer the scenarios and recap which characters are in that scenario and the sorts of things that they do and or did in the text or in the story, and have the students play those characters and talk to each other in English, in character. For example, Alice meets the Cheshire Cat. They can ask each other questions and offer responses. Or Alice meets the caterpillar, or indeed Alice, if it's a larger group, meets the March Hare and the Mad Hatter and the Dormouse. And you can have them asking questions and phrases. You can reiterate language you've already established and you're working on too, but in character. So people aren't themselves, they're playing a character and having fun with it. These bits of dialogue, these exchanges, can then be re-examined by the groups or pairs and polished. And by polishing and rehearsing their exchanges, by having creatively discovered language and then editing it and perfecting it, they can then show each other these pieces of drama they've created solely by experimenting with the text and the characters and some scenarios. It's a lovely way of people beginning to speak and perform to each other with confidence. Another good exercise is the the idea of a narrator and actors. In this case, the narrator is the only one who speaks, and in groups, you take it in turns to be the narrator. You offer yourselves a scenario from the reader, from the story, and one person narrates the action of the characters, and the actors merely act and don't speak, and the narrator explains what's happening to an audience. And similarly, this can be polished and perfected. Initially, it will be a game where you take it in turns to be narrator, but then it can be also used as a piece of performance to show each other, to show the class too, which would be quite an exciting way of speaking English. And finally, for a small activity, a short one, the idea of hot seating, which is not an uncommon drama exercise. One person is a character from the story, and the audience asks them questions. And in so doing, they learn more about the character, and the person or the actor playing the character gets to respond, but also think about the character at the same time. Hence, playing a character and speaking English at the same time. Okay, I hope those could be useful for you. This, of course, applies to any story, not necessarily just Alice. Here we have the Macmillan Alice 150 Years illustration. It's a beautiful design. Here we go. Some main lesson activities for you to consider, or if we're going to continue our culinary talk, to chew on. The idea of group scripting and then performing. Creating a script as a group and then performing it is an extremely good objective. You need to do a little bit of preparation here. Choose a section of the story and section off the entire story into smaller scenarios. Okay. Identify the characters and what they do, their actions within those scenarios, and just write a little tiny, short, exciting summary of that scenario. Yeah. Read out each of the scenario summaries to the class in story sequence. Okay. Images are useful here to show alongside. Okay. To put the text or the summary into some sort of visual context. You can discuss each one, the ideas for dialogue, yeah, for when two or more people are speaking. The ideas where there may be monologue, one person speaking out loud to an audience, and a lot of that happens in the Alice stories. Alice is just speaking out loud to no one in particular but herself, monologue. Okay. And of course, stage directions. Okay. The idea of what is the character supposed to be doing and why. Put the class into working groups, and the idea of the task is that they are to speak in English when they work. Okay, so they're going to create in English and perform in English. Each group works on one of the scenarios from the story sequence, putting the scenario in their own words, not using the text, but using their recall of the story and what they already know about it and the information that you've given them. So they come up with the script themselves. They can write it down, of course, and submit their script to the rest of the class. So each group will provide a script for that particular scenario that they've created themselves in their own words. You now have a class play, one that's been created by them, adapted from the story or reader, and you have something to do now. Put it on, perform it. Let's have it read out, let's have it rehearsed, let's see how it scans, let's see how it flows, let's listen to the language and enjoy each other's creation. You don't necessarily have to indicate who performs this. You can actually ask the class at that point, let's have some actors to play Alice consistently throughout, or you can actually have a few Alices and all the rest of the characters. Volunteer actors and upstep your performers, the ones who are guaranteed to enjoy the experience and set an example for others. And then perform the play, have it read out with the actors reading out the script, and have a huge amount of fun with it. Okay. Here we have the Queen of Hearts and Alice playing croquet down there, the illustration. It's just a very active scenario, that particular one. Here we are, look, there's an example of this particular exercise that I've just described to you. I've chosen to prepare the section of the story when Alice meets the Duchess in her house, her cook, a baby who's crying very loudly, and a Cheshire cat with an enormous grin. And here we have 1 to 4. I've sectioned off that story section into small scenarios, giving a few ideas of what we expect to happen in that scenario. As you can see, for example, let's pick on number 3, shall we, for the sake of time. The cook begins throwing kitchen things at the Duchess. The Duchess begins throwing the baby to the cook. Alice asks them to stop. The Duchess and cook leave, and Alice puts the baby carefully on a chair. Now, the working group that would have that scenario would have to think about dialogue, monologue, and stage directions, and write that script in their own words, and then find a way of putting it into a piece of drama. A good fun exercise that should take up a lesson easily, and may even take up 2 if they get really into it. Okay, is that everyone happy with that? Good. Mind you, we can't please everyone, and that's a good thing too. Here we have another activity, a play script. You may be thinking that, oh, that sounds like the previous exercise. Now, this is slightly different. The idea of this one is script a section of the story by adapting the words directly from the text. So in this case, working groups, again speaking in English, will use the text itself to create a play script and not necessarily put the script in their own words. They'll be examining the text, comprehending it, and extracting what they need from the text itself to create a play. Again, stage directions and the layout of dialogue, monologue, narration, stage are extremely important. And here you can see on the slide the typeface changes, and we can see how a play is laid out. Alice, semicolon, I wonder who lives here. I'm sure they won't mind if I take a little look. That's her script. There's some stage directions in parenthesis, in brackets. Alice enters, the cook is stirring the soup, the Duchess is nursing the baby. We have Alice sneezing, that's another stage direction. Yeah, that's certainly too much pepper in that. I do hope it isn't rabbit soup. Now, stage directions are maps for actors when they're reading a script out and when they're learning it. It's a guide for them, and very, very important, and an excellent example of using English too. So creating a script directly from the text is a slightly different approach, but you will create a beautiful script as well, which also should be read through as a class and performed, and devising action and staging to go with it. Each little mini play can be performed to each other as a little mini festival, within the class, celebrating their work. It's very important when you create something that's a piece of drama, a piece of theatre, a piece of story, that it eventually faces an audience of some sort, yes, which is really what it's lacking, in a sense. All the work's there, it just needs to face an audience, yes. Okay. Here we have a good example of a play script, when Alice meets the Cheshire cat, and a nice illustration to go with. And this comes directly from the text itself, so all of the words have been extracted from the reader, from the original story. And the style of English is, of course, in keeping with the period of when it was written. Okay, good. Now, sharing and showing are very important. The sharing and showing is the idea of showing and sharing your work with an audience, performing. I think sharing is probably related to a more intimate audience, performing to each other in class, sharing your work, sharing your results, a bit like the results of a scientific experiment. In this case, it would be a language experiment, a theatre experiment. Let's share what we've done. Showing is a little more serious. I think showing to me means inviting an audience that haven't been involved in the process, that come in completely cold, and are expecting a show. As you're rehearsing and working on your scripts and your drama exercises that are related to a reader, in this case Alice, or a story, consider, would you like to show them as well as share them with each other? Would you like to invite people to come and watch the work and perform to them? And there could be many occasions that you choose to do this. Inviting other members of staff. It could be people from the community, people from the students' background, from their families and friends. If you don't want to do this, and the class decides that they don't, and it's important to work as a group, then just have fun using the scripts to speak English with. But if you do, then choose an occasion and invite an audience. And remember, not everyone will want to perform. Find other roles for them to do that involve them speaking English too, such as meeting and greeting audiences, devising publicity, talking to people, or introducing the plays is a good way of involving everyone. If you're going to do a performance, then of course you must commit to it. Once you've invited an audience, they're expecting something to happen, so it has to happen. And the idea of clubbing together now, grouping together as a class and committing to an end product is an excellent motivator. Finally, enjoy the reward. Enjoy the applause of an audience, receiving your work and appreciating what you've done. Well, I hope everyone enjoyed listening and watching this webinar. And do put into practice what you see here and experiment with your class. And here's to them speaking more English. Thank you ever so much. Cheerio now. All the best. Bye-bye.